There is a sound that plays when two gems become one. It is not quite music and it is not quite silence. It sits somewhere in the space between a hum and a chord, between a breath drawn in and a breath let go. If you have watched Steven Universe even once, you know that sound. It arrives with light. It arrives with movement. Two bodies turning toward each other, limbs extended, fingers reaching, and then the glow swallows everything, and there is only the shape of something new where two separate beings used to stand. The sound of fusion activating is one of the most distinctive audio cues in modern animation. It carries weight, it carries warmth, and depending on who is fusing and why, and whether or not they have chosen this for themselves, it can carry something else entirely, something closer to dread. Think about the first time you heard it. Maybe it was opal forming, two slender figures spinning into a four-armed archer with a face so calm it barely seemed alive. Maybe it was later, in a prison cell aboard a Homeworld ship, when Jasper demanded to know what Garnet was, and Garnet sang her answer. Or maybe, and this is the version that lingers in the strangest way, maybe the first fusion sound you truly remember is the wrong one, the twisted, grinding, almost mechanical noise of shards being forced together in the dark of an abandoned kindergarten. Fragments of broken gems fused against their will into something that should not exist. That sound is different. That sound does not hum, it scrapes. Steven Universe is a show about many things. It is about a boy growing up. It is about found family and inherited trauma, and the slow, painful work of learning to be kind in a universe that does not always reward kindness. But if you strip everything else away, if you pull back all the layers of plot and mythology and musical numbers, the show is about fusion. Not fusion as a superpower, not fusion as a tactical advantage. Fusion as a relationship made visible. Two beings choosing to share space, to share a body, to become something that is neither one nor the other, but something entirely new. And the fusions that Homeworld forbids, the ones that the Diamond Authority declares unnatural and obscene, tell us everything about what this show is really about. They tell us about love and consent and autonomy. They tell us about the structures that try to define what kind of connection is acceptable and what kind is not. They tell us about bodies that do not belong to the people who inhabit them, and about the quiet, revolutionary act of deciding that they do. This is Futuro, and tonight we are going to spend a long time with these forbidden fusions. Let us start with how fusion actually works in Steven Universe, because the show is remarkably specific about its rules, and those rules matter more than most viewers realize on a first watch. Fusion in Steven Universe requires two things. The first is a dance. The second is emotional harmony. You cannot have one without the other. Two gems can perform a technically perfect dance, every step synchronized, every movement mirrored with precision, and if the emotional connection is not there, nothing happens. Conversely, two gems can feel deeply bonded, can share an intimacy so profound it reshapes the way they see the world, and if they cannot find a shared rhythm, a way of moving that expresses that bond physically, the fusion will not hold. Both elements must be present, the body and the feeling, the form and the content. This is not an accident of world building. This is the entire point. The show introduces fusion for the first time in the episode Giant Woman, the 12th episode of Season 1, which aired on February the 24th, 2014. It is a deceptively simple episode. Steven is fascinated by the idea that Amethyst and Pearl can combine into a single larger being, and he spends most of the episode trying to get them to do it. He even sings a song about it, the infectiously catchy Giant Woman, which plays like a child's simple wish, but contains, in retrospect, the seed of everything the show will eventually say about fusion. Steven does not want to see Opal because she is powerful. He wants to see her because she is something new, something that only exists when these two people he loves choose to come together. And when Opal finally does appear, she is extraordinary. 4 arms, a long, elegant frame, a bow formed from the combination of Amethyst's whip and Pearl's spear. She moves with a fluidity that neither Amethyst nor Pearl possesses individually, a grace that is both controlled and wild, precise and instinctive. She barely speaks. She does not need to. Her existence is the statement, and after she saves Steven and defeats the bird monster at the top of the sky spire, she unfuses almost immediately because Amethyst and Pearl are, at this point in the series, terrible at getting along. Their fusion is beautiful but fragile. It requires them to set aside everything that makes them clash, and they can only sustain that for a few minutes at a time. This is the show establishing its rules. Fusion is not a button you press. It is not a technique you master through training. It is a relationship. And like all relationships, it has good days and bad days, moments of perfect synchronicity, and long stretches where the two people involved cannot seem to find each other at all. The dance is the physical expression of that truth. Pearl dances like a ballerina, all precision and control, every movement measured, and deliberate. Amethyst dances like someone at a party who does not care who is watching, loose and chaotic and free. For them to fuse, they have to find a middle ground, a rhythm that belongs to neither of them individually, but emerges from their willingness to meet each other halfway. When they cannot do that, when Pearl is too rigid or Amethyst is too wild, the fusion fails. And when it succeeds, even briefly, the result is something that could not exist without both of their contributions. As the first season progresses, we see other fusions, and each one reinforces this idea while adding new dimensions to it. Sugilite, the fusion of Garnet and Amethyst, appears in Coach Steven. She is enormous, volatile, voiced with thunderous energy by Nicki Minaj. Her weapon is a massive flail, Amethyst's whip, wrapped around Garnet's gauntlets to create something that swings with devastating, almost reckless force. Sugilite is powerful, yes, but she is also dangerous because the emotional dynamic between Garnet and Amethyst, when amplified through fusion, tends toward excess. Amethyst's impulsiveness feeds into Garnet's quiet intensity, and the result is a being who does not want to stop, who does not want to come apart, who would rather keep destroying things than return to being two separate people. There is something uncomfortable about Sugilite, and the show does not shy away from that discomfort. Fusion can be unhealthy. Fusion can be an escape from the self rather than an expression of it. Then there is Sardonyx, the fusion of Garnet and Pearl, who first appears in the second season. Where Sugilite is raw power, Sardonyx is performance. She is theatrical, elegant, almost vaudevillian, wielding a massive warhammer with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. She speaks in a voice that sounds like it belongs on a stage, because that is what the fusion of Garnet's confidence and Pearl's desire for approval produces. Something that wants to be watched, something that wants to be admired. And this becomes the center of a deeply painful arc when it is revealed that Pearl has been manufacturing reasons to fuse with Garnet, secretly repairing a Homeworld communication hub so that they will need to form Sardonyx to destroy it again. Pearl is addicted to the feeling of being Sardonyx, to the sense of strength and worth that comes from being fused with Garnet, and she's willing to deceive someone she loves to keep experiencing it. Fusion, the show tells us, can be abused. It can become a dependency. It can be a way of avoiding your own inadequacy rather than confronting it. Each fusion weapon tells a story. Opal's bow, elegant and precise, speaks to the potential harmony between Amethyst and Pearl when they manage to align. Sugilite's flail speaks to uncontrolled power, to the intoxication of strength without restraint. Sardonyx's warhammer speaks to performance, to the desire to be seen as something greater than you are. The weapons are not just cool designs. They are emotional x-rays of the relationship that produce them, and this is where Steven Universe diverges most sharply from the tradition it borrows from. Rebecca Sugar, the show's creator, has spoken openly about the influence of Dragon Ball Z on the series. The fusion dance, the transformation sequences, the idea that two characters can combine into a more powerful form, all of this has its roots in the anime tradition that Sugar grew up loving. In Dragon Ball Z, fusion is a tactical decision. Goten and Trunks perform the fusion dance to become Gotenks because they need more power to fight a specific enemy. The dance must be precise, the movements mirrored exactly, and the result is a straightforward multiplication of combatability. It is a power-up. It is a mechanic. Sugar took that mechanic and asked a different question. Not what if two fighters could combine their strength, but what if two people could combine themselves? What would that look like? What would it feel like? And what would it mean for a society to declare that certain combinations of selves are unacceptable? Consider what happens to a fusion's personality. In Dragon Ball Z, Gotenks is essentially a more powerful version of the two boys who form him, with their traits amplified but their identity largely unchanged. In Steven Universe, a fusion is a genuinely new person. Opal is not Pearl, acting like Amethyst, or Amethyst acting like Pearl. Opal is someone who has never existed before, someone who emerges from the overlap between two distinct beings, someone who possesses her own thoughts, her own preferences, her own way of moving through the world. She exists only as long as the relationship that produces her holds steady, and when it falters, she vanishes. This is not a power-up, this is birth. Every fusion is a birth, and every unfusion is a kind of small, consensual death, the dissolution of a self that only exists in the space between two others. This distinction matters enormously. In most fiction that features combination or merging, the individual identities are preserved intact, waiting to be separated out again, like ingredients in a recipe. Steven Universe rejects that model entirely. A fusion is not a container holding two people. A fusion is a person, full stop. who happens to be made of two other people. Garnet does not experience herself as Ruby wearing a Sapphire suit or Sapphire piloting a Ruby vehicle. Garnet experiences herself as Garnet. She has her own desires, her own sense of humour, her own way of showing love. When she unfuses, Garnet ceases to exist, and Ruby and Sapphire return, carrying memories of having been someone else, someone who was them and was not them at the same time. The show understands something about relationships that most fiction only gestures at. It understands that when two people truly connect, the thing that exists between them is not just the sum of their parts. It is something with its own character, its own momentum, its own needs. Anyone who has been in a close relationship of any kind, romantic or platonic, familial or chosen, knows this. The relationship itself becomes a third entity, something that requires care and attention and honesty to sustain. Steven Universe makes that invisible third entity visible. It gives it a body, it gives it a name, it gives it a weapon. That question, the question of forbidden fusion, is where the show finds its deepest and most radical territory, and it begins, as so many of the show's most important revelations do, with Garnet. But that is not even the strangest part of Garnet's story, because by the time the show reveals what Garnet truly is, many viewers have been watching her for over 50 episodes without realising that they have been looking at a forbidden fusion the entire time. The reveal happens in Jailbreak, the final episode of the first season, which aired on March 12th, 2015. It is, by nearly any measure, one of the most significant episodes in the history of American animation. Steven is trapped in a cell aboard a Homeworld ship. He escapes and begins searching for his friends. He finds a small red gem he does not recognize, panicking, slamming her fists against the walls, calling out for someone named Sapphire. Then he finds Sapphire, a small blue gem, calm but clearly distressed, whispering Ruby's name. Steven brings them together, and when they see each other, when Ruby and Sapphire lock eyes across that hallway, they run. They reach for each other. They dance right there in the bowels of an enemy ship. A desperate, joyful, spinning embrace, and the light swells and the music begins, and suddenly Garnet is standing there, whole again, and she is furious and relieved and radiant all at once. Then Jasper steps forward. Jasper, who has been presented as this season's most physically imposing antagonist, who has already defeated Garnet once by destabilizing her form. Jasper looks at Garnet and sneers. She calls fusion a cheap trick. She calls it a tactic for making weak gems stronger, and Garnet does not argue with her. Garnet sings. The song is called Stronger Than You, and it is performed by Estelle, the Grammy-winning British singer and songwriter who voices Garnet throughout the series. It is a love song, not a battle anthem, not a declaration of superiority, but a love song, sung by a fusion to the person who thinks fusion is disgusting. Garnet sings about being made of love. She sings about being an experience. She sings about the fact that Ruby and Sapphire are so much more than just two gems standing next to each other, that what they are together is something entirely new, something that cannot be reduced to its parts or dismissed as a trick. And while she sings, she fights Jasper, and she wins, and the song builds to this extraordinary crescendo where the music and the combat and the emotion all become the same thing. Stronger Than You became iconic almost immediately. The choice to cast Estelle was itself a statement. Estelle is known primarily as a musician, not a voice actor, and her vocal quality, warm and rich and grounded, gives Garnet a presence that feels lived in rather than performed. When Garnet sings, it does not sound like a cartoon character delivering a musical number. It sounds like a person telling you something true about themselves. The song was written by Rebecca Sugar, who wrote most of the show's music, and it functions simultaneously as a fight scene, a love declaration, and a thesis statement. The lyrics never once mention Ruby or Sapphire by name. They do not need to. The song is about what it means to be the product of love, to be a relationship given form, and to refuse to apologize for existing. It was the moment the show announced, in the clearest possible terms, what it was about. Not just that Garnet was a fusion, though that twist alone would have been enough to redefine the series, but that Garnet was a fusion between two gems of different types. Ruby is a common soldier. Sapphire is an aristocratic seer. On Homeworld, they belong to different castes. They serve different diamonds. They are not supposed to interact as equals, let alone fuse. Their fusion is not just unusual, it is, by the standards of the society they come from, an abomination. The full story of how Ruby and Sapphire met is told in The Answer, the 22nd episode of the second season, which aired on January 4th, 2016. It is one of the most visually distinctive episodes in the entire series, rendered in a storybook art style with soft watercolors and simplified shapes, as if the story itself has been worn smooth by the telling. Garnet narrates it to Stephen as a bedtime story, which is fitting because it is a story about how everything she is began. Sapphire is a member of Blue Diamond's court. She is a Sapphire, which means she has the ability to see the future, and she has been brought to Earth to observe a battle between Homeworld forces and a small group of rebels led by Rose Quartz. Sapphire already knows how the battle will end. She has seen it. 3 of Blue Diamond's ruby guards will be destroyed. Sapphire herself will be puffed, and the rebels will be captured. It is a predetermined outcome. There is nothing to fear, but one of those ruby guards, the ruby who will eventually become half of Garnet, does something Sapphire did not foresee. When the rebel Pearl lunges at Sapphire, this ruby does not step aside. She does not accept the future Sapphire has predicted. She leaps in front of the blow. She protects Sapphire, not because she was ordered to, but because in that moment she feels something she cannot name, and their bodies collide, and the light comes, and for the first time in either of their lives, they fuse. The reaction from Blue Diamond's court is immediate and visceral. Disgust, horror. The other gems recoil as if they have witnessed something obscene. Blue Diamond herself orders that they be separated and that Ruby be shattered, destroyed, for the crime of fusing with a gem above her station. This is not presented as a political disagreement or a difference of opinion. It is presented as a hate crime. The court's reaction mirrors, with painful precision, the way queer relationships have been received throughout human history. The revulsion, the sense of contamination, the belief that some forms of love are so fundamentally wrong that they must be punished with death. Ruby and Sapphire escape. They flee into the wilderness of ancient Earth, and they begin the slow, tentative process of understanding what happened to them. Sapphire is shaken because for the first time in her existence, she did not see the future correctly. Ruby's choice broke the timeline. It introduced something Sapphire's vision could not account for, a variable that had no precedent, and that variable was love. Ruby, for her part, is terrified. She knows what she did was forbidden. She knows that by fusing with Sapphire, she has committed an act that her entire civilization considers unforgivable. But she also knows, with a certainty that sits beneath her fear like bedrock, that what she felt during that fusion was the most real thing she has ever experienced. They spend time together. They learn each other. Ruby is fire and motion, all impulse and feeling. A gem who processes the world through her body, through action, through doing rather than thinking. Sapphire is ice and stillness, contemplation and patience. A gem who has spent her entire existence seeing what comes next and accepting it as inevitable. They are opposites in nearly every way, and the show does not pretend otherwise. Their differences are real. Their arguments, when they come in later episodes, are real. Ruby runs hot and acts without thinking. Sapphire runs cold and thinks without acting. But in this moment, on this hillside, those differences are not obstacles. They are the raw material of something new. They fuse again, deliberately this time. Not by accident, not in the chaos of battle, but by choice. They dance on a hillside at twilight and they become Garnet. And Garnet looks down at her own hands, at this new body that belongs to both of them, and neither of them. And she laughs, not because it is funny, but because it is right. Because this is what she is supposed to be. This is what they are supposed to be together. And then they find Rose Quartz. And Rose does not recoil. Rose does not call them an abomination. Rose looks at Garnet and asks her how she feels. Not what she is, not what she has done, not whether she understands that she is breaking the rules. Rose asks Garnet how she feels, and Garnet says she feels lost and confused and scared, and Rose tells her that those feelings are her own and that she never has to justify them to anyone. This is the emotional foundation of the Entum Crystal Gem Rebellion. Rose Quartz did not just fight Homeworld because of its colonialism, though that matters too. She fought Homeworld because Homeworld tells its people who they are allowed to be and who they are allowed to love. The caste system is not just a hierarchy. It is a system of enforced identity, a regime that assigns every gem a purpose, a role, a set of acceptable relationships, and punishes any deviation with shattering. Cross-gem fusion is the most visible form of that deviation, the most impossible to hide, because it writes itself on the body. When ruby and sapphire fuse, everyone can see that something forbidden has happened. There is no closet large enough to contain a fusion. What makes Garnet so remarkable as a character is that for most of the first season, none of this is visible. She is simply Garnet, the tallest of the crystal gems, the most composed, the one who wears the visor that hides her three eyes. Viewers know she is strong and quiet and occasionally funny in a deadpan way that makes her silence feel intentional rather than empty. She leads without being bossy. She fights without being cruel. She loves Steven without being sentimental about it. And all of that, every aspect of her character, is the product of Ruby and Sapphire's relationship. Her strength is their combined strength. Her composure is the balance between Ruby's fire and Sapphire's ice. Her three eyes are the merging of their vision, two becoming something that sees more than either could alone. The show hides this in plain sight for over a year, and when the truth is revealed, it transforms everything that came before. Every scene with Garnet becomes richer. Every moment of her calm, her leadership, her occasional flashes of vulnerability, all of it takes on new meaning when you understand that you are watching two people in love, choosing to be together in every moment. The wedding comes much later. It happens in Reunited, a double-length episode that serves as both the 23rd and 24th episodes of the 5th season, airing on July 6th, 2018. Ruby and Sapphire get married. It is the first same-sex wedding ever depicted on Cartoon Network, and it almost did not happen. Rebecca Sugar fought for this scene for years. She had been imagining it as far back as 2014, during the production of Jailbreak, but every time she raised the idea with Cartoon Network executives, she encountered resistance. The network's concerns were not about the quality of the storytelling, they were about international distribution. Steven Universe aired in countries where same-sex relationships are criminalized, and the network feared that a same-sex wedding would result in the show being pulled from those markets. Sugar was told to make Ruby male. She was told the characters should never kiss on the mouth. She was told, in various ways and at various times, that the relationship she had built at the center of her show was too visible, too explicit, too much. Sugar refused. She has spoken publicly about these battles, about the years of negotiations and compromises, and the constant exhausting work of pushing against an institution that wanted her to make the love at the heart of her show smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. The ceiling was always there, she would later explain. The more she pushed, the more visible it became. Every time she proposed something that made Ruby and Sapphire's relationship more explicit, more undeniable, more like the love stories that heterosexual characters got to have without question, she met resistance. Not always outright refusal. Sometimes it was softer than that. Sometimes it was a suggestion, a note, a gentle redirection. Could we make it less obvious? Could we frame it differently? Could we leave room for interpretation? And every time Sugar came back with the same answer, no, this is a love story. It deserves to be told like one. She pushed back by making Ruby and Sapphire more central to the narrative, not less. Every episode that explored their relationship was a deliberate act of advocacy, a way of saying that this love story deserved the same space and the same weight as any other love story on television. She built the wedding into the architecture of the story so deeply that removing it would have required dismantling the narrative itself. She made it inevitable, she made it necessary, and then she made it happen. And when the wedding finally aired, it was everything it needed to be. Ruby in a dress because she wanted to wear a dress, Sapphire in a suit because she wanted to wear a suit. The vows simple and sincere, the kiss unambiguous, Steven officiating with tears in his eyes because he understands, perhaps better than anyone, what this moment means. What it means for two beings who were told their love was a crime to stand in front of their family and say, yes, this is who we are, and we are not afraid anymore. The wedding is immediately interrupted by an attack from Yellow Diamond and Blue Diamond, because the show is not interested in easy resolutions. But the fact that it happens at all, the fact that it aired on a children's network in 2018, changed the landscape of animated television. It opened doors, it made space, it told a generation of young viewers that love like Ruby and Sapphires is not something to be ashamed of. And it told the networks that audiences would show up for stories that treated queer love with the same seriousness and tenderness as any other kind. And if you are enjoying this, a quick subscribe really does help. It is free, and it means we can keep making these long videos for you. Now, we need to talk about the other end of fusion, the dark end. The end where the sound does not hum, where the light does not glow, where everything that makes fusion beautiful is stripped away, and what remains is something closer to a horror movie than a children's cartoon. We need to talk about forced fusion. The episode is called Keeping It Together. It is the 8th episode of the 2nd season, and it aired on June 17th, 2015. In terms of pure tonal shift, it might be the most jarring 11 minutes in the history of the show. Steven and the crystal gems return to the kindergarten, the massive abandoned facility where Homeworld once grew new gems from the earth itself. They are looking for Peridot, trying to figure out what she has been doing on Earth. What they find instead is something none of them were prepared for. Deep in the kindergarten, in a chamber that feels less like a room and more like a wound, they discover the experiments. Gem shards, fragments of shattered crystal gems, fused together against their will. Not whole gems, not beings who chose to come together. Shards, pieces of people, fragments of consciousness forced into the same space, fused into grotesque, twitching forms that reach and grab and clutch at the air with too many hands, making sounds that are not quite voices and not quite screams. They are, in the most literal sense, the remains of fallen soldiers, prisoners of war whose bodies were broken and then reassembled into weapons by the regime that killed them. The visual design of the forced fusion experiments is deliberately disturbing. These are not characters in the way that Garnet or Opal or Sugilite are characters. They have no faces, they have no coherent form, they are clusters of limbs, tangles of half-formed bodies reaching in different directions, as if each shard is trying to pull away from the others but cannot. They move with a jerky, stop-motion quality that makes them look wrong in a way that the show's usually fluid animation deliberately avoids. Everything about them is designed to communicate violation. This is what fusion looks like when consent is removed. When the choice that defines fusion, the mutual willingness to be together, is stripped away and replaced with force. These are not fusions, they are violations made visible. But the cluster, for all its horror, is not the only way fusion can be forbidden. The forced fusions were a violation of the dead. What comes next is a violation of expectation. Because while Homeworld was busy legislating which gems could fuse with which, while the diamonds were building weapons out of broken bodies and enforcing a caste system that left no room for anything new, a boy on Earth did something that should not have been possible. He fused with a human. Think about what the show has established up to this point. Fusion is a gem ability. It requires light-based forms that can merge. It requires a shared emotional wavelength expressed through synchronized movement. Humans do not have light-based forms. Humans do not have gemstones embedded in their bodies. Humans are organic, fragile, mortal. And yet in the 37th episode of the 1st season, in an episode called Alone Together, that aired on January the 15th, 2015, Steven Universe and Connie Maheswaran are dancing on the beach, and something happens that Pearl calls unprecedented. They fuse. The scene itself is worth sitting with. Steven has been trying to fuse all day. He has watched Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl perform fusions that produce towering, powerful beings, and he has tried again and again to synchronize with them. It has not worked. The gems are patient, but there is an unspoken question hanging over every failed attempt. The question that hangs over Steven in nearly every early episode. Is he enough of a gem to do this? Is the human half of him too heavy, too dense, too limited? He cannot summon his shield reliably. He cannot control his healing powers. And now he cannot fuse. The pattern is familiar. Steven tries to be a gem and falls short, so he stops trying. He goes outside where Connie is waiting, and they talk. and they laugh. And at some point they start to dance. Not a gem fusion dance, not a choreographed ritual designed to synchronize two light-based beings, just two kids moving together, comfortable in each other's presence. And the glow begins, not from Stephen's gem alone, from both of them, from the space between them. And then they are not two people anymore. Stevonnie stands on the beach, taller than Stephen, taller than Connie, a teenager seemingly, with long dark hair and a body that looks like it belongs to someone several years older than either of its components. The crystal gems react with varying degrees of shock. Pearl is unsettled. This was not supposed to be possible. Her understanding of fusion, refined over thousands of years of gem civilization, has no category for what she is looking at. Amethyst, characteristically, finds the whole thing hilarious. She is the one who gives the fusion a name, Stevonnie, and then there is Garnet. Garnet, who is herself a fusion. Garnet, who knows better than anyone what it means to exist as two people choosing to be one. Garnet takes off her visor and she smiles, and she says something that sounds simple but carries the weight of her entire history. She tells Stevonnie to go have fun. That single instruction matters more than it appears to. Garnet is not just being supportive. She is making a declaration. She is saying that this fusion, this impossible thing, this unprecedented merging of human and gem, is not a problem to be solved or a phenomenon to be studied. It is a person, and that person deserves joy. Stevonnie walks to the boardwalk, and here the episode does something extraordinary. It shifts genre. What began as a story about Stephen's insecurities, about his gem powers, becomes, suddenly and without warning, a story about what it feels like to walk through the world in a body that other people respond to. Lars sees Stevonnie and stumbles over his words. Sadie stares. The donut shop, which Stephen and Connie have visited dozens of times without incident, becomes a space charged with a new kind of attention. Stevonnie is beautiful in a way that makes people act differently around them, and neither Stephen nor Connie has any framework for processing that. This is where Rebecca Sugar's vision for Stevonnie becomes clearest. Sugar described the character as a metaphor for all the terrifying firsts in a first relationship, and for what it feels like to hit puberty and suddenly find yourself with the body of an adult. How quickly that happens, how it feels to have a new power over people, or to suddenly find yourself objectified, all for seemingly no reason, since you are still just you. That last phrase is the key. Since you are still just you. Stevonnie is Stephen and Connie. They are still the same kids who were dancing on the beach 10 minutes ago, but the world is not treating them the same way. The boardwalk scene builds this dissonance carefully. Stevonnie dances at a rave. People watch. People are drawn in. The attention is flattering at first, then overwhelming. Kevin, a teenager at the party, approaches Stevonnie and pressures them to dance. The discomfort is palpable. Stevonnie does not know how to navigate this. They are emotionally a 12-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl, experiencing for the first time what it means to be seen as attractive, as available, as an object of desire. The gap between how they feel inside and how the world is treating them becomes too wide, and they come apart. Stephen and Connie tumble onto the floor, two kids again, bewildered but intact. The episode never frames the unfusing as a failure, it frames it as a boundary. Stevonnie came apart because the experience exceeded what Stephen and Connie were ready for, and the show treats that as healthy. There is no scene afterward where the gems express disappointment. There is no training montage where Stephen and Connie learn to hold the fusion longer. The show simply says, without qualification, that coming apart was the right thing to do. The boundary was respected. Both participants are okay. That is enough. This is fusion as consent in its most literal form. You fuse when you are ready. You unfuse when you need to. The fusion exists only as long as both participants choose it. Critics noted at the time that Alone Together was one of the most precise depictions of ongoing active consent ever produced for a young audience. Stephen and Connie check in with each other throughout. They ask if the other is comfortable. They express uncertainty, and the uncertainty is treated as valid. The fusion is never an obligation. It is always always a choice. Stevonnie uses they and them pronouns. This was not incidental. Sugar confirmed that Stevonnie is an experience, the living relationship between Steven and Connie, and that Stevonnie challenges gender norms as an individual. In a later update to the show's social media presence, Stevonnie's bio would read plainly, intersex, non-binary, they and them. For a Cartoon Network show airing in 2015, this was not subtle. It was a statement, and the show did not treat it as a statement, it treated it as a fact. Stevonnie exists. Stevonnie uses these pronouns. The sky did not fall, but Alone Together is only the beginning of Stevonnie's arc. The fusion returns in episodes that push further into what it means to be two people inhabiting one body, and none of them push further than Jungle Moon. This is the 12th episode of Season 5, airing on January 5th, 2018, and it places Stevonnie in a situation neither Steven nor Connie has faced before. They are alone. Stranded on an alien moon after a battle in space, Stevonnie must survive without the crystal gems, without Beach City, without any of the structures that have defined Steven and Connie's individual lives. They hunt for food, they build shelter, they talk to themselves, both voices present inside one mind, working through fear and frustration together. The episode is a survival story, but its most important sequence happens when Stevonnie falls asleep. In the dream, Stevonnie is not Stevonnie. They are Pink Diamond. Or, more precisely, they are experiencing a memory that belongs to Pink Diamond, filtered through Steven's gem and Connie's human consciousness. The dream shows Pink Diamond as a petulant, frustrated figure, desperate for Yellow Diamond's approval, throwing tantrums when she does not receive it. Yellow Diamond towers over her, dismissive and cold, and Pink Diamond smashes a window in rage. And in the glass, for the first time in the series, the audience sees Pink Diamond's face reflected back at them. Stevonnie wakes up. The dream was real, the memory was real, and Stevonnie, this fusion of a human girl and a half-gem boy, just experienced something that happened thousands of years before either of them existed. The boundaries of what Stevonnie is, of what fusion can access, have expanded again. This is not just two kids sharing a body. This is two people sharing a lineage, a history, a weight that neither of them asked to carry. What makes Stevonnie matter to this larger story about forbidden fusions is precisely this quality of impossibility. Stevonnie should not exist. Every rule of gem civilization says so. Every principle of gem biology says so. And yet Stevonnie does exist. And their existence is never treated as a mistake, it is treated as a gift. The show does not resolve the impossibility, it does not explain the mechanism, it simply presents Stevonnie as proof that the rules were always too narrow, that the categories Homeworld built to contain fusion, to control it, to weaponize it, were never large enough to hold what fusion actually is. And there is one more Stevonnie moment that crystallizes all of this. Together Alone, the 27th episode of Season 5, airing on December 31st, 2018, brings Stevonnie to Homeworld itself. Steven is there as Pink Diamond's successor, attempting to negotiate with the other diamonds, and he organizes a ball, an Era 3 ball, meant to demonstrate that things can change, that the old rules need not apply. Connie is there beside him. They are trying to be diplomatic. They are trying to play the game by Homeworld's rules, at least for one evening, and then they fuse, not deliberately, not as a political act. They are dancing together, close and comfortable, and the fusion happens the way it always happens with them, naturally, almost inevitably, the way water finds its level. Stevonnie stands in the middle of the diamond ballroom, a human gem fusion, an impossibility wrapped in an affront, and the room goes silent. Yellow Diamond's reaction is immediate and furious. Blue Diamond demands they unfuse. The weight of Homeworld's entire ideology bears down on this single being, this person who should not exist, standing in the heart of the empire that would have destroyed them. And in response, the crystal gems do something extraordinary. Ruby and Sapphire fuse into Garnet. Pearl and Amethyst fuse into Opal. They stand with Stevonnie, not as a tactical maneuver, but as a declaration of solidarity. We are all forbidden. We are all here anyway. And then something happens that even the crystal gems did not expect. two Homeworld jades, gems from different courts who have never had permission to fuse, look at each other and reach out. They form Lemon Jade, a fusion that has no precedent, no authorization, no place in the caste system. They exist for only a few seconds before Yellow Diamond poofs them, but those few seconds are enough. The desire for fusion, for connection, for the right to love freely, is not limited to the crystal gems. It lives inside Homeworld too, suppressed and punished and still alive. Yellow Diamond poofs Garnet. She poofs Opal. She grabs Stevonnie and throws them into confinement. The violence is swift and absolute, the response of a system that cannot tolerate what it is seeing. But the damage is done. The ball has shown everyone in attendance that fusion between different types is not an aberration. It is a need. It is perhaps the need. And you cannot legislate a need out of existence. You can only punish people for having it. Fusion, Steven Universe keeps insisting, is not a technology. It is not a weapon. It is a relationship. And relationships do not obey caste systems. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if Stevonnie represents what fusion looks like when it is born from trust and tenderness, then what comes next represents the opposite, because fusion can also be a prison. Malachite forms in the final minutes of Jailbreak, the final episode of Season 1 of Season 1, which aired on March 12, 2015. The same episode that reveals Garnet as a fusion, the same episode that gives the audience Stronger Than You, also gives them this. Jasper, defeated and desperate, turns to Lapis Lazuli. Lapis has been a prisoner. She was trapped in a mirror for thousands of years, then freed by Steven, then dragged back to Homeworld by Jasper. She has spent the entire episode in chains, both literal and figurative. And now Jasper is asking her to fuse. Jasper's pitch is pure manipulation. She frames fusion as a tactical move. Together, she says, they can be strong enough to defeat the crystal gems. Together, they will be unstoppable. And Lapis, standing there with the weight of millennia of imprisonment behind her, agrees. She takes Jasper's hand. They dance, if you can call it that. There is no joy in it, no harmony, no connection. It is a transaction. Two beings using each other. Malachite forms. She is enormous, green-skinned, with 4 arms and wild hair, and an expression that suggests nothing close to stability. And then Lapis does something no one expected. She wraps Malachite in chains of water and drags them both to the bottom of the ocean. The line Lapis delivers in this moment is one of the most important in the series. She tells Steven, essentially, that she is done being everyone's prisoner. Now Jasper is her prisoner. The words are defiant, triumphant, and deeply wrong. Because Lapis is not free. She has simply changed the nature of her cage. She is still trapped. She is still defined by captivity. The only difference is that now she is the one holding the chains. Malachite sits at the bottom of the ocean for months. The show does not forget about her. In Chileted, the 10th episode of Season 2, which aired on June 19th, 2015, Steven enters Malachite's psychic space through a dream. What he finds there is not a fusion, it is a war. Lapis and Jasper are locked in constant struggle. The dominant one stands above, the suppressed one writhes below, and the positions shift and shift again. Neither is winning, neither can leave, and gradually something worse emerges. Malachite begins to develop a will of her own. The fusion itself, born from hatred and control, starts to become its own entity, and that entity is not interested in either Lapis or Jasper's individual goals. It is interested in existing, in consuming. The visual language of these scenes is borrowed from horror. Water pours from hollowed eyes. Bodies distort. The ocean, which should be Lapis's element, her source of power, becomes a tomb. Steven reaches out to Lapis in the dream, tries to help, and Lapis pushes him away. She tells him in essence to leave her alone. She cannot be rescued because she is not just a prisoner, she is also the warden, and the warden cannot leave. The show is telling you something about toxic relationships with a precision that most adult dramas never achieve. When two people are bound together by mutual destruction, the relationship itself becomes a third party. It develops its own gravity. It wants to continue, even when both participants want to stop. Malachite, as a character, embodies this principle literally. She is the relationship given form, and she does not care about what Lapis wants or what Jasper wants. She cares about existing. The fusion has become its own cage, and neither prisoner has the key because the key would require them to agree on something, and the only thing they agree on is that they hate each other. Malachite finally surfaces in Super Watermelon Island, the first episode of Season 3, airing on May the 12th, 2016. She appears on Mask Island, massive and unhinged, and the crystal gems respond by fusing into Alexandrite, the 3-gem fusion of Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. The battle is spectacular in scale. Alexandrite versus Malachite. Love-based fusion versus hate-based fusion. Everything the show has been building about the nature of fusion comes to a head in this fight, and the outcome is never really in doubt. Malachite is powerful, terrifyingly so, but she is also tearing herself apart from the inside. A fusion held together by opposition cannot sustain itself against a fusion held together by trust. Alexandrite wins. Malachite breaks apart. Jasper and Lapis separate, and for a moment it seems like the story might be over. It is not. Alone at Sea is the 15th episode of Season 3. It aired on July 28th, 2016, and it is, quietly, one of the bravest episodes of television ever made for a young audience. The premise is gentle. Steven takes Lapis on a boat trip. She has been living at the barn with Peridot, slowly rebuilding a life that does not revolve around captivity. The ocean, once her prison and her weapon, is supposed to be something she can enjoy again. Steven is trying to help. He rents a boat. They go out on the water. For a few minutes it almost works. Then Jasper appears. She surfaces from the water, grabs the side of the boat, and the tone of the episode shifts entirely. Jasper is not attacking. She is not threatening. She is begging. She gets on her knees, grabs Lapis by the arm and pleads with her to fuse again. The words she uses are a textbook recitation of abusive relationship manipulation. It will be better this time. She has changed. Lapis changed her. She is the only one who can handle Lapis's kind of power. The show holds on this scene. It does not rush past it. It does not soften it with humour or cut away to a reaction shot. It forces the audience to sit with the image of Jasper on her knees, desperate and manipulative and genuine all at once, and Lapis standing there, wavering. Because Lapis does waver. For a moment you can see it, the pull, the gravity of the toxic relationship reaching out, trying to drag her back in, and then Lapis says something that transforms the entire arc. She tells Jasper that she was terrible to her, that she liked taking everything out on her, that she needed to, that she hated her, that it was bad. Sit with that for a moment. Lapis is not saying what you expect the victim to say. She is not saying, I was hurt and you hurt me. She is saying, I hurt you too, and I liked it. The show is refusing the simple narrative. In most stories about toxic relationships, there is a clear villain and a clear victim. Steven Universe insists that the reality is more complicated. Lapis used Malachite as a vessel for her own rage, her own need for control, her own accumulated trauma from thousands of years of imprisonment. She found in Jasper someone she could dominate, and she took it. She took everything out on her. And when the fusion ended, when the chains broke, Lapis did not just lose a captor, she lost an outlet. Rebecca Sugar spoke about this dynamic directly. She wanted to express what it feels like to be in an awful situation with someone who makes you believe everything is your fault and that you need them. But she also wanted to show the other side, the part that rarely gets depicted, where the person who has been powerless seizes control and discovers that they are capable of cruelty too. Lapis exercised control to take everything out on Jasper. When they separated, Lapis had no avenue for that desire for control. This is Malachite's real legacy, not the spectacle of the fight on Mask Island, not the body horror of the underwater sequences. The real weight of Malachite lives in Alone at Sea, in a quiet conversation on a boat where a character admits that she was both victim and perpetrator, and the show does not forgive her or condemn her. It just lets her say it. Jasper is punched through the hull of the boat by a wave of water. She falls back into the ocean. The crisis is over. But Lapis does not celebrate. She does not feel victorious. She sits on the damaged boat with Steven, and the episode ends, and there is no triumphant music, no resolution, no sense that the story has concluded. Because the story of Malachite is the story of what happens when two people fuse for the wrong reasons and discover that the fusion changed them both in ways they cannot undo. The show holds this. It does not look away. A children's show on Cartoon Network, airing on a Thursday evening in the summer of 2016, told its audience that relationships can be mutually destructive, that victims can also cause harm, that wanting to go back to something toxic is a real and understandable impulse, and that the hardest part of leaving is not the leaving itself, but the reckoning with who you became while you were inside it. The show treated its audience as people who could handle that complexity, and it was right. Malachite is the dark mirror of Garnet. Where Garnet is fusion as love sustained across millennia, Malachite is fusion as mutual destruction sustained across months. Where Garnet proves that two different beings can choose each other and become something greater, Malachite proves that two beings can trap each other and become something worse. The show needs both. The argument about fusion, about relationships, about consent and autonomy, and the courage it takes to let someone in only works if the show is honest about what happens when those things are absent. Garnet is the ideal, Malachite is the warning. And between those two extremes, in the space where most relationships actually live, there is Smoky Quartz. Earthlings is the 22nd episode of Season 3. It aired on August 8th, 2016, just 11 days after Alone at Sea. And if Malachite showed the audience the worst fusion can be, Smoky Quartz shows them something gentler and more complicated. Not the best fusion, not the most powerful, just the most necessary one. The context matters. Steven and Amethyst are at the Beta Kindergarten, the second gem production facility on Earth, a place where gems were made hastily during the war. The holes in the canyon walls are irregular, misshapen, evidence of a rushed manufacturing process. Peridot, examining the exit holes, notes that most of the gems produced here would have been defective, and then she finds Jasper's exit hole. It is perfect, geometrically flawless. Jasper, the soldier who has been hunting them, terrorizing them, fusing with corrupted gems out of desperation, emerged from this chaotic place as the single, perfect specimen. Amethyst looks at Jasper's hole and then looks at the ground. She does not say anything. She does not need to. The audience already knows what Amethyst carries. She emerged from the prime kindergarten, the first facility, and even there, she came out wrong. Too small, too late. She has spent the entire series measuring herself against other quartzes and finding herself lacking. And now here is Jasper, her same gem type, produced in worse conditions, and still perfect. The math is devastating. When Jasper attacks, Amethyst fights her alone. She loses, badly. Jasper knocks her down, dismisses her, calls her a defective runt, and Amethyst lies on the ground and you can see it in her face. The belief that Jasper is right, that she will never be enough, that she is exactly what Homeworld says she is, a mistake. Steven kneels beside her, and here the show does something remarkable with its own mythology. Steven does not give a speech. He does not tell Amethyst she is special or important or stronger than she thinks. He says that he knows how she feels, that he is not rose quartz, that he is not the leader the crystal gems need, not the fighter, not the healer, not the gem his mother was. He tells her that he is not good enough either. Two characters, both defined by the feeling that they are less than what they are supposed to be, look at each other and recognize the same wound. Steven does not try to fix Amethyst. Amethyst does not try to fix Steven. Neither of them has the answer. Neither of them is pretending to. They are just two people sitting on the ground, admitting out loud that they feel like failures, and discovering that the admission itself is a kind of bridge. And they fuse, not through a formal dance, not through a ritual, through the simple act of reaching out and finding someone who understands. The fusion does not happen because they have solved their problem. It happens because they have stopped pretending they do not have one. Smoky Quartz appears. 3 arms, a stocky build, a crystalline yo-yo formed from the combination of Steven's shield and Amethyst's whip, and a grin. Smoky Quartz grins. They crack jokes. They spin the yo-yo with the loose confidence of someone who has been waiting their whole life to show up. And when Jasper charges, Smoky Quartz does not just fight her, they toy with her. 3 yo-yos spinning in 3 hands, wrapping Jasper up, bouncing her off the canyon walls, all while delivering one-liners that are equal parts self-deprecating and genuinely funny. The humour matters. It is not bravado, it is defence. Smoky Quartz is funny in the way that people who have spent a long time feeling small learn to be funny. The jokes deflect. They keep the world at a distance. They are the armor of two people who have spent too much of their lives apologizing for existing. And inside those jokes, if you listen carefully, there is an undercurrent of real confidence. Not the manufactured confidence of someone performing strength, the quieter kind. The kind that comes from finally being seen by someone who carries the same weight. In Know Your Fusion, the second episode of Season 4, which aired on August the 12th, 2016, Smoky Quartz visits the crystal gems again. Sardonyx, the theatrical fusion of Garnet and Pearl, hosts a talk show-style investigation of Smoky's abilities. And during the segment, Smoky begins to falter. The self-deprecation, which worked as combat banter against Jasper, starts to curdle into something genuine. Smoky says casually that they are not that great, that they do not really have any unique abilities, that they are just two people who are not enough on their own. The room goes quiet. Sardonyx drops the performance, and the episode addresses, directly and without comedy, the fact that Smoky Quartz is a fusion of two people who both believe they are inadequate, and that sometimes that belief does not cancel out. Sometimes it doubles. The fusion can hold all the love and understanding in the world, and the wound can still be there, threaded through every joke, every spin of the yo-yo, every casual self-dismissal that sounds like humour but is not. This is what Steven's fusions bring to the larger conversation about fusion in the show. They are not just tactical, they are not just spectacle. Each one is a window into a specific relationship, with all its warmth and all its damage, and the fusion becomes a mirror that shows both participants something about themselves they could not see alone. Rainbow Quartz 2.0 is the next window. The fusion of Steven and Pearl, debuting in Change Your Mind, the 4-part finale of Season 5 that aired on January the 21st, 2019. But to understand what Rainbow Quartz 2.0 means, you have to go back to the original. In We Need to Talk, which aired on June 18th, 2015, the show flashes back to a time when Rose Quartz was still alive, and Greg Universe was a young musician trying to win her heart. Rose and Pearl performed together, dancing during a musical sequence featuring the song What Can I Do For You, and Pearl initiates the fusion. The original Rainbow Quartz appears, radiant and four-eyed and voluminous-haired, dancing through the performance with a grace that is clearly, deliberately aimed at the human watching from the sidelines. The fusion serves a very specific purpose, and the purpose is not musical. Pearl does not fuse with Rose because the moment calls for it. She fuses with Rose to make Greg feel small, to remind him that he is human, that he cannot do this, that Rose belongs to a world he can never enter. The beauty of the fusion is the cruelty of it. Pearl is showing Greg the one thing he can never be. The original Rainbow Quartz is a weapon of jealousy wielded as a performance of intimacy. Pearl's pain, her possessiveness, her inability to share Rose with anyone, is written into the fusion's very existence. And the show does not hide this. Greg sees it. He understands what Pearl is doing, and it works. He feels small. He feels human in the worst possible way. So when Steven and Pearl fuse decades later, in Change Your Mind, the weight of that history is present. Rainbow Quartz 2.0 is not the original. The voice is different. The energy is different. Where the first Rainbow Quartz was a display of ownership, the second is something closer to mutual delight. Rainbow Quartz 2.0 is whimsical, elegant, playful in the way a particularly attentive parent might be playful. They carry an umbrella that functions as both shield and spear, defensive when open, offensive when closed, a combination of Steven's protection and Pearl's precision. The personality is warm and nurturing, with an English accent and an air of gentle authority, like someone who genuinely enjoys taking care of people. The contrast is the point. Rose and Pearl's fusion was beautiful and broken. Steven and Pearl's fusion is beautiful and healed. The show is not erasing the history. It is showing what happens when the same core relationship, the bond between a Pearl and a universe, is rebuilt on different foundations. Pearl is no longer fusing to prove something. She is fusing because she has finally made peace with who Steven is, with who Rose was, with the fact that love does not have to be possession to be real. And then there is Sugilite. If Stevonnie represents the beauty of fusion at its most innocent, Sugilite represents something closer to its shadow. She is what happens when two people come together and can lose themselves entirely in the rush of it. In the Season 1 episode Coach Steven, which first airs on August 21st, 2014, Garnet and Amethyst fuse to destroy a communication hub. The result is Sugilite, enormous, volatile, four-armed, and voiced by none other than Nicki Minaj, and that casting choice is not accidental. Rebecca Sugar and the crew want someone whose voice carries undeniable power, someone who sounds like she could level a building just by raising her voice. Minaj brings exactly that energy. Sugilite does not just speak, she commands. But the brilliance of the episode lies in what Sugilite reveals about the nature of fusion itself. Up until this point, we have mostly seen fusion presented as something aspirational. Garnet is the living proof that fusion can be stable, beautiful, permanent. But Sugilite complicates that. She is not stable. She is not beautiful in the way Garnet is beautiful. She is raw, unfiltered power, and she loves it. When the communication hub is destroyed, Sugilite does not want to stop. She does not want to diffuse. She wants to keep going, keep smashing, keep feeling that incredible rush of being unstoppable. This is the first time the show really confronts us with an uncomfortable truth about relationships. Sometimes when two people come together, they do not bring out the best in each other. Sometimes they amplify each other's worst tendencies. Garnet is already strong, and Amethyst already has a reckless streak. Combined, those traits do not balance out, they multiply. Sugilite is the product of strength without restraint, confidence without caution, and standing on the sidelines through all of this is Pearl. Pearl, who watches Garnet choose Amethyst for the fusion. Pearl, who is told to stay behind because she is not strong enough. Pearl, who trains Steven while the others are gone, trying to convince him and really trying to convince herself that real strength is not about size or power. It is about discipline. It is about knowing who you are. Pearl's song in this episode, Strong in the Real Way, is one of the most quietly devastating moments in Season 1. On the surface, it is a training montage song, but underneath, it is Pearl's desperate attempt to assert her own value in a team where she feels increasingly outclassed. She cannot fuse with Garnet the way Amethyst can. She does not have the raw physicality, and so she clings to technique, to precision, to the idea that there is a different kind of strength that matters just as much. The tragic irony, of course, is that Pearl is right. Sugilite proves that brute force without control is dangerous. When Sugilite finally returns, she is so lost in her own power that she attacks the crystal gems. She does not recognize friend from foe. She is, in that moment, exactly the kind of fusion that Homeworld fears, one where the individual identities have been swallowed whole. And it takes Pearl, the one who felt the most inadequate, to stand up and fight back. Pearl does not win through overwhelming force. She wins through determination, through the very qualities she had been trying to prove mattered all along. But Pearl carries her own wounds from this experience, and those wounds fester in ways that do not become apparent until much later when the show introduces Sardonyx. Sardonyx first appears in the Season 2 episode Cry for Help, which premieres on July 13th, 2015. She is the fusion of Garnet and Pearl, and she is everything Sugilite is not. Where Sugilite is chaotic and destructive, Sardonyx is poised and theatrical. Where Sugilite roars, Sardonyx performs. Voiced by Alexia Kadime, a West End veteran who has played Elphaba in Wicked and Nabelungi in the Book of Mormon, Sardonyx brings a showmanship quality to fusion that we have not seen before. She has her own talk show format, complete with an invisible audience. She is graceful, witty, a little vain. She is, on the surface, the perfect fusion, except she is not, because the foundation she is built on is rotten. In Cry for Help, Pearl secretly repairs the communication hub that the gems have already destroyed, just so that Garnet will need to fuse with her again to take it down. Pearl does this not once, but multiple times. She manipulates the situation, creates a false crisis, all because she is addicted to the feeling of being Sardonyx. She is addicted to the feeling of being close to Garnet, of mattering, of being chosen. This is one of the most emotionally complex arcs in the entire series. Pearl's deception is not malicious in the traditional sense. She is not trying to hurt anyone, but she is violating Garnet's trust in the most intimate way possible. Fusion in Steven universe is consent. It is vulnerability. It is two people choosing to share everything they are with each other. And Pearl is engineering that consent through lies. When Garnet discovers the truth, her reaction is devastating. She does not yell. She does not attack. She simply refuses to speak to Pearl. And that silence carries more weight than any confrontation could. Because Garnet, who is herself a fusion, understands better than anyone what Pearl has done. Pearl has not just lied about a communication hub. She has turned their most intimate connection into a tool for her own emotional needs. The contrast between Sugilite and Sardonyx is one of the most elegant things the show ever does. Sugilite is too wild, a fusion where both parties lose control and get swept up in the thrill of power. Sardonyx is too controlled, a fusion where one party engineers the entire experience for selfish reasons. Both are unstable, both are unhealthy, but they are unhealthy in completely opposite ways. Sugilite fails because of excess, Sardonyx fails because of deception, and together they paint a picture of just how many ways a relationship can go wrong, even between people who genuinely care about each other. Because that is the thing the show never lets us forget. Pearl loves Garnet. Amethyst loves Garnet. Garnet loves both of them. These are not bad people. These are flawed people navigating the impossible complexity of being close to someone else. And fusion, that beautiful metaphor for intimacy, does not protect you from your own flaws. It amplifies them. It puts them on display. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you would rather keep hidden. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, if Sugilite and Sardonyx show us the ways that two-person fusions can go wrong, then Alexandrite shows us what happens when you try to force an entire family to function as one. Alexandrite is the fusion of Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, all three crystal gems combined into a single towering figure. She first appears in the Season 1 episode, Fusion Cuisine, which airs on November the 6th, 2014, and the circumstances of her creation are, in hindsight, perfectly chosen. Steven wants the gems to meet Connie's parents. Connie's family is traditional, structured, normal, in all the ways Steven's family is not. And Steven, in his earnest desire to make everything work, convinces Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl to fuse into Alexandrite so they can pretend to be his mother. One person, one normal human passing parent. The plan fails almost immediately. And it fails for the most relatable reason imaginable, because you cannot force three distinct personalities into a single performance. Alexandrite sits at the dinner table and falls apart. Her components argue over what to eat. Her body language shifts wildly between Pearl's rigidity, Amethyst's looseness, and Garnet's stoicism. At one point, she literally catches fire from the internal conflict. The scene is played for comedy, and it is genuinely funny. But underneath the humour, there is a real observation about families. Families are messy, they disagree, they have fundamentally different approaches to life, and when they are forced to present a unified front, at a dinner party, at a school event, in front of the neighbours, the cracks show. Alexandrite is not unstable because the individual gems are weak. She is unstable because they are trying to be something they are not. They are trying to compress three full identities into one, and the result is chaos. But then we see Alexandrite again, much later, in circumstances that could not be more different. In Super Watermelon Island, the first episode of Season 3, which premieres on May 12, 2016, the crystal gems face their most dangerous opponent yet, Malachite, the tortured fusion of Jasper and lapis lazuli, who has been trapped at the bottom of the ocean for months. To fight her, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl fuse into Alexandrite once more, and this time Alexandrite holds. Not perfectly, not easily, but she holds. The difference is purpose. In Fusion Cuisine, Alexandrite has no real reason to exist. She is a costume, a disguise, a lie told to make a social situation more comfortable. There is no shared conviction holding her together. In Super Watermelon Island, all three gems want the same thing. They want to protect Steven. They want to stop Malachite. They want to save the world. That shared purpose does not erase their differences. Alexandrite still struggles, still has to coordinate three conflicting fighting styles, but it gives them something to unite around. And that is enough. This is one of the most quietly profound things Steven Universe says about families and about any group of people who choose to stay together despite their differences. Unity does not require agreement. It does not require everyone to think the same way or want the same things in every moment. It requires a shared commitment to something larger than any individual disagreement. The crystal gems fight constantly. Pearl and Amethyst bicker over everything from combat strategy to household chores. But when it matters, when Steven is in danger, when the Earth is threatened, they find each other. They fuse. They become something greater. And that brings us briefly back to Opal. Opal is the fusion of Pearl and Amethyst, and she is notably rare. In a show full of fusions that appear and reappear throughout the series, Opal shows up only a handful of times, and that rarity is itself a statement. Pearl and Amethyst are, in many ways, the most fundamentally incompatible members of the crystal gems. Pearl is precise, analytical, haunted by her past. Amethyst is impulsive, emotional, determined to live in the present. They love each other, that is never in question, but they struggle to find common ground. They argue, they misunderstand each other, they hurt each other in ways that are rarely intentional, but always real. And so Opal, their fusion, is fragile. She is beautiful when she appears, graceful, powerful, serene in a way that neither Pearl nor Amethyst manages alone, but she cannot last. The smallest disagreement, the tiniest crack in their harmony, and she falls apart. Opal is not a failure. She is a reminder that some connections require more work than others. Some relationships demand constant attention, constant effort, constant willingness to set aside your own perspective and meet someone halfway. The fact that Opal is rare makes her precious. Every time she appears, it means that Pearl and Amethyst have, however briefly, found that elusive common ground. They have stopped fighting long enough to truly see each other, and in those moments, what they create together is extraordinary. Alexandrite, then, is Opal's lesson writ large. She is the proof that a family does not need to be harmonious to be powerful. She is the proof that conflict and love can coexist, that people who drive each other crazy can still choose, in the moments that matter most, to stand together. She catches fire at a dinner table and defeats a titan at the edge of the sea. Both of those things are true. Both of those things are Alexandrite. Both of those things are family. Sunstone arrives in the same episode. Steven and Garnet fused. And if Rainbow Quartz 2.0 is tenderness, Sunstone is warmth and confidence and an almost comedic self-assurance, a fusion who breaks the fourth wall and speaks directly to the audience like a safety mascot from a 90s educational program. Sunstone is not deep in the way Stevonnie is deep or heartbreaking in the way Smoky Quartz is heartbreaking. Sunstone is joy, pure, unfiltered, uncomplicated joy. And sometimes after everything this show has put its characters through, joy is exactly what is needed. And then there is Obsidian, the full crystal gem fusion. Steven, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, all four of them combined into a single colossal being. Obsidian towers over the landscape, a fusion so large and so powerful that she wields a sword she forges from lava drawn from inside her own body. She appears in the climax of Change Your Mind, scaling the side of the diamond mech, and her presence is a statement. This is what happens when a family, a real family with all of its history and all of its pain and all of its love, chooses to stand together. Obsidian is not elegant. She is enormous and rough-hewn and terrifying. She is exactly what they need her to be. And so, with Steven himself as the test case, the show has made its point about what fusion can mean when the old rules no longer apply. But now it is time to go somewhere else entirely. Because there is a group of characters in this series who take everything we have discussed so far and push it even further. Characters who exist not just outside the norms of Homeworld, but outside any norm at all. Characters who were never supposed to exist. They are called the off-colors. In the third episode of Season 5, 5, which aired on May 29, 2017. As part of a 1-hour special titled Wanted, Steven finds himself stranded deep beneath the surface of Homeworld. He is trapped in an abandoned kindergarten, the kind of place where gems were once manufactured and then discarded when they were no longer useful. And it is here, in the dark, in the forgotten corners of a society built on perfection, that he meets a group of gems who have been hiding for a very, very long time. There is rhodonite, a fusion of a ruby and a pearl. There are the rutile twins, a single gem who emerged from the ground fused together, two faces sharing one body. There is Padparadsha, a sapphire whose visions do not work the way they are supposed to. And then there is fluorite. Fluorite is a fusion of 6 gems. Think about that for a moment. 6 entirely separate individuals choosing to remain fused together indefinitely. Not as a weapon, not as a battle strategy, not even as a dramatic gesture, just as a way of being, just as a life. Fluorite moves slowly. She speaks slowly. Every word she says feels like it has been carefully considered, passed through 6 different minds before it reaches her lips. And that is not a flaw. That is simply what it looks like when 6 people need to reach consensus before a single thought can be expressed. Rebecca Sugar confirmed at San Diego Comic-Con in July 2017 during a panel on the series that fluorite is a deliberate representation of a polyamorous relationship. When an audience member asked about the inspiration for the character, Sugar explained that fluorite was created at the request of kids at the Long Beach LGBT Center who wanted to see that kind of relationship reflected in the media they consumed. 6 gems choosing each other, all of them part of a single relationship that works precisely because every member is valued, heard, and present. In a children's cartoon on Cartoon Network in 2017, the fact that this exists at all is remarkable. Polyamory is one of those subjects that mainstream media still struggles to portray with any nuance. It is either played for comedy, presented as inherently dysfunctional, or ignored altogether. And here is Steven Universe, not only including a polyamorous character, but making her one of the wisest, calmest, most grounded figures in the entire series. Fluorite does not need to justify herself. She does not need to explain why 6 gems would choose to be together. She simply is, and the show asks nothing more of the audience than to accept that. Her slowness is not played as a joke either. It is treated with patience and respect. When Fluorite speaks, the other characters wait. They listen. They give her the time she needs. And there is something deeply moving about that, about the idea that a relationship involving 6 people might naturally require more time, more care, more deliberate communication. That slowness is not weakness. It is the cost of making sure everyone is heard. Then there is Rhodonite, and her story is perhaps even more tragic. Rhodonite is a fusion of a ruby and a pearl, which on the surface sounds like Garnet, a fusion of a ruby and a sapphire, but the parallels only go so far. Rhodonite's component gems once served a gem aristocrat named Morganite. The ruby was a guard, the pearl was a servant, and despite their roles, despite everything, Homeworld's rigid caste system told them about who they were supposed to be. They fell in love and fused. Morganite discovered them and had them rejuvenated, a process that wiped their memories entirely. They forgot each other, they forgot the fusion, they forgot everything. And then starting from nothing, with no memory of what they had shared, they fell in love again, and fused again, and were rejuvenated again. This happened 18 times. 18 times, 2 gems were stripped of everything they knew, reduced to blank slates, and 18 times they found their way back to each other. There is a love story buried in that detail that the show never had time to fully explore, one that the creators had planned to expand upon, but ultimately could not fit into the series. But even in its compressed form, the implication is staggering. That love, real love, is not something that lives in memory. It is something deeper than that, something that persists even when every trace of it has been erased. After the 18th rejuvenation, Morganite had had enough. She replaced them both and sentenced them to be shattered. They fled into the abandoned kindergarten and eventually found the other off colours, and that is where they have been ever since, hiding, surviving, still fused, still together. Rhodonite is anxious. She worries constantly. She frets about danger. about discovery, about everything. And that anxiety makes perfect sense when you consider what she has been through. 18 times, the thing she loves most was taken from her. 18 times, she was told that what she is should not exist. Of course she is afraid. The miracle is that she is still here at all. And then there is Padparadscha. She is a sapphire, which in Homeworld system means she should have the ability to see the future. That is what sapphires do. That is their entire purpose. But Padparadscha's visions are reversed. She sees the recent past, not the future. She announces events that have already happened with the same breathless certainty that other sapphires use to predict what is about to occur. On Homeworld, this makes her defective, useless, an error. But in the context of the off-colours, in this found family of outcasts and misfits, she is simply Padparadscha. She is cheerful and kind, and the others protect her not because she serves a function, but because she is one of them. Many fans and critics have read Padparadscha as a metaphor for neurodivergence, for the experience of processing the world on a different timeline than everyone else. Her visions are not wrong. They are accurate. They are simply late. And in a society that values only one kind of processing, only one speed, only one way of experiencing reality, that lateness is enough to condemn her. The show does not say any of this explicitly. It does not need to. The metaphor speaks for itself, quietly, the way the best metaphors always do. Together, the off-colours represent something that the show has been building toward for its entire run. They are the ones who do not fit, the ones who were never meant to exist, the fusions that should not be, the gems whose bodies do not match the template, the minds that work differently. And the show does not treat them as objects of pity. It treats them as people with fears and hopes and personalities, people who found each other in the dark and chose to stay. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now here is something most people miss entirely. For all the fusions we have discussed, for all the combinations of gem and gem, there is one fusion in this series that breaks every rule we thought we understood. Because it is not a fusion of two gems. It is a fusion of a half gem and a fully human being. No gemstone, no light-based form, just a man and his guitar and a lifetime of regret and love. In Steven Universe the movie, which premiered on Cartoon Network on September 2nd, 2019, Steven and his father Greg perform a song called Independent together. It is a duet about their relationship, about the ways they are alike and the ways they are different, about the fact that they can be their own people and still be connected. And as the music builds, as the emotion between them reaches its peak, something impossible happens. They fuse. The result is Steg, and Steg is, to put it mildly, not what anyone expected. He is tall, he is muscular, he has 4 arms and an 8-pack of abs visible through a torn sky blue shirt that once belonged to Steven. His hair flows in a long dramatic pompadour. He radiates confidence, charisma, and a kind of effortless rock star energy that is equal parts ridiculous and genuinely moving. Ted Leo provides his voice, and the performance captures something specific, something that sits right at the intersection of Greg's unfulfilled dreams and Steven's boundless earnestness. Because that is what Steg represents. He is the rock star Greg Universe never got to be. Greg gave up his music career. He gave up his name, his identity, his ambitions. He lived in a van for years. He did all of this in part because of his love for Rose Quartz, and then after she was gone, because of his love for Steven. Greg is a character defined by sacrifice, by the things he set aside so that someone else could thrive. And Steg is the version of Greg who never had to make those sacrifices. The version where all that talent, all that passion, all that rock and roll energy gets to exist at full volume. But Steg is also Steven. He carries Steven's gemstone in his navel, centered among those absurd abs. He has Steven's warmth, Steven's openness, Steven's desire to connect. And so Steg is not just the father who could have been. He is the father and sun at their best, together amplified, a living monument to the bond between them. The creative team had planned this fusion since early in the series. The idea that Steven could fuse with his human father was something that Rebecca Sugar and the writers had wanted to explore, but they waited, they saved it. They knew that this moment needed the right context, the right emotional weight, and the movie provided exactly that. By the time Independent Together plays, the audience has spent years with these characters. They know Greg's sacrifices, they know Steven's struggles, and so when the fusion happens, it does not feel like a gimmick, it feels earned. There is also something quietly revolutionary about what Steg proves. Until this moment, fusion was understood to be a gem ability. It required light-based forms, gemstones, the unique physiology of gemkind. Greg has none of that. He is fully, completely, unremarkably human. And yet fusion works. It works because, in the end, fusion in Steven Universe was never really about physics or biology or gem technology. It was always about connection, about two people being so in sync, so emotionally aligned that the boundary between them dissolves. And if that is true, then it does not matter whether you are made of light or made of flesh and bone. What matters is the relationship. Steg is the proof. The living, ABE, having, pompadour-wearing proof. And that brings us to something the show handles with extraordinary care, something that elevates fusion from a clever narrative device to a genuinely important piece of storytelling. Fusion, in Steven Universe, is about consent. Rebecca Sugar has spoken about this directly and repeatedly, in interviews at conventions. In the companion book Fusion for Beginners and Experts, she has described fusion as a metaphor for all relationships, not just romantic relationships, not just friendships, all of them. Every kind of connection between two or more people, with all the complexity, vulnerability, and potential for harm that entails. And if fusion is a relationship, then the show must also reckon with what happens when that relationship is violated. What happens when someone is manipulated into fusing? What happens when consent is taken away? The Cry for Help arc is where the show confronts this head on. The 11th episode of Season 2, titled Cry for Help, aired on July 13th, 2015. The setup is straightforward. Peridot has been using a gem communication hub to broadcast signals, disrupting television across Beach City. The crystal gems need to destroy the hub, and to do that, Garnet suggests fusing with amethyst to form Sugilite. But Pearl intervenes. She volunteers to fuse with Garnet instead, forming Sardonyx. And Sardonyx is magnificent. She is theatrical, elegant, bombastic. She carries herself like a talk show host, all confidence and wit and dramatic flair. Her weapon is a giant warhammer formed from the combination of Garnet's gauntlets and Pearl's spear, and she wields it with the precision of a performer who knows exactly how good she looks. Garnet's steadiness gives her power. Pearl's grace gives her precision. Together, they are dazzling. Pearl loves being Sardonyx. She loves the feeling of Garnet's strength flowing through her, the confidence, the certainty. As Pearl, she is often anxious, uncertain, plagued by self-doubt. As Sardonyx, all of that disappears. She feels whole, she feels powerful, she feels like someone who matters. And so Pearl does something terrible. She secretly rebuilds the communication hub after they destroy it. She fixes it so that it starts broadcasting again, so that the gems will need to form Sardonyx again to take it down, and then she does it again and again. Each time she pretends to be surprised that the hub is back online. Each time she gets to fuse with Garnet. Each time she gets to feel that rush of power and belonging. It is Amethyst who figures it out. And when the truth comes to light, Garnet's reaction is devastating. She does not yell. She does not attack. She simply looks at Pearl with an expression that communicates something far worse than anger. She feels used. She trusted Pearl. She opened herself up to the most intimate act a gem can share, and Pearl manipulated that trust for her own gratification. The show frames this explicitly as a violation, not a misunderstanding, not a disagreement, a violation. Pearl used Garnet. She used the fusion. She treated Sardonyx this living expression of their relationship, as a tool for her own emotional needs. And the show does not flinch from the implications. Think about what this means in the context of the metaphor. Fusion is a relationship. Fusion requires trust, openness, vulnerability, and Pearl exploited that vulnerability. She did not force Garnet to fuse, not physically, but she manufactured the circumstances that made fusion necessary over and over because she could not bring herself to be honest about what she really wanted. She wanted to feel strong, she wanted to feel important, and instead of talking to Garnet about those feelings, she engineered situations where Garnet would fuse with her, never knowing that the whole thing was a lie. This is a pattern that exists in real relationships. The person who creates problems so that their partner will comfort them. The person who manufactures crises so that they can feel needed. The person who uses intimacy not as an expression of genuine connection, but as a way to fill a void inside themselves. The show does not name these dynamics explicitly. It does not need to. Anyone who has experienced them recognizes what is happening immediately. Garnet's pain is not just about the deception. It is about the fact that Sardonyx, a fusion she thought was built on mutual respect and genuine connection, was actually built on lies. Every moment of Sardonyx's existence during those repeated fusions was tainted. The joy, the power, the closeness, all of it was compromised because one half of the fusion was there under false pretenses. Garnet did not consent to fusing with someone who was manipulating her. She consented to fusing with a friend who needed her help. Those are not the same thing. The arc does not resolve quickly either. The tension between Pearl and Garnet stretches across multiple episodes. Pearl is desperate for forgiveness. Garnet is cold, distant, unable to look at Pearl without remembering the betrayal. Amethyst, caught in the middle, tries to hold the team together. Steven watches all of this happen and does not fully understand it, which is itself a kind of commentary, because children often witness relationship dynamics they cannot yet name or comprehend. The resolution comes in Friendship, the 15th episode of Season 2, which aired on July 17th, 2015. The crystal gems are chasing Peridot through an ancient gem vessel, and they end up trapped in a room that is slowly crushing them. Pearl and Garnet must fuse to escape, not because Pearl has engineered the situation, but because the danger is real. And before they fuse, Pearl finally says what she has been unable to say throughout the entire arc. She admits that she is weak. She admits that she looks to Garnet for strength because she does not believe she has enough of her own. She admits that she used the fusion because it made her feel like more than she is. And Garnet listens, and Garnet tells Pearl that she did not want another version of herself. She wanted Pearl, the real Pearl, with all her flaws and insecurities, the Pearl who is strong in her own way, even if that strength looks different from Garnet's. They fuse into Sardonyx. They escape the trap, and this time the fusion is real. This time it is built on honesty. On the floor of the ship, Amethyst lays down, sighs, and says, "Finally," and the episode ends. But the damage was already done, and the show knows it. The Cry for Help arc does not pretend that a single conversation fixes everything. It does not pretend that Pearl's apology erases the violation. What it does is show that repair is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, but only through honesty, only through the willingness to be vulnerable in a way that does not use the other person. Sardonyx herself becomes a more complex character because of this arc. Every time she appears after Cry for Help, there is a layer of history beneath her theatrical exterior. She is still flashy, still confident, still the life of the party, but the audience knows what she was built on, both the genuine connection and the deception. She is a fusion that carries scars, even if those scars are not visible. And then there is Alone Together, which approaches the question of consent from an entirely different angle. The 37th episode of Season 1, which aired on January 15th, 2015, introduces Stevonnie, the fusion of Steven and Connie. But the real weight of the episode comes when Stevonnie encounters a character named Kevin at a dance. Kevin is drawn to Stevonnie. He follows them. He invades their personal space. He refuses to take no for an answer. He talks over them. He pressures them to dance with him. He does all the things that people do when they have decided that their desire matters more than someone else's discomfort. And Stevonnie, this fusion of two young people who are still figuring out what they are, does not know how to handle it. They are uncomfortable. They are confused. They eventually agree to dance with Kevin, not because they want to, but because they do not know how to say no firmly enough to make him stop. And the dance becomes aggressive, unsettling, a physical expression of the discomfort roiling inside them. Eventually, the intensity becomes too much. Stevonnie unfuses. Stephen and Connie separate, sitting on the dance floor, shaken. Kevin panics and leaves. Rebecca Sugar wrote and storyboarded this episode, along with Hilary Florido and Katie Mitroff, and she has spoken about it as a deliberate exploration of consent. The point of the episode is not that Kevin is a villain in the traditional sense. The point is that his behaviour, his refusal to respect boundaries, his insistence on getting what he wants, is a form of violation. It is subtle. It is common. It happens every day, in dance clubs and classrooms and workplaces. And the show names it, quietly but clearly, as wrong. What makes the scene particularly effective is the fusion metaphor itself. Stevonnie is two people. They are already in a relationship, already sharing a body, already navigating the complexities of being more than one person in a single form. And Kevin does not care about any of that. He does not see two people. He sees an attractive person and decides he is entitled to their attention. He does not ask. He takes. The discomfort Stevonnie feels is the discomfort of having your boundaries ignored. The unfusing is the breaking point, the moment when the pressure from outside becomes too much for the relationship inside to bear. Stephen and Connie did not choose to unfuse. They were pushed apart by an experience they were not ready for, an intrusion they did not invite. And this is the genius of using fusion as a metaphor, because when the show depicts Kevin's behaviour through the lens of fusion, it makes something abstract feel concrete. Consent is not just a concept, it is a feeling. It is the feeling of someone standing too close, the feeling of a hand on your wrist when you did not ask for it, the feeling of being seen as a body and not a person. Stevonnie feels all of this, and because the audience has spent the entire episode inside their experience, the audience feels it too. Together, the cry for help arc and alone together form two halves of a single argument. Cry for help shows what happens when consent is violated by someone you trust, someone close to you, someone who uses the language of care and partnership to mask their own needs. Alone together shows what happens when consent is violated by a stranger, someone who does not know you and does not care to, someone who sees your discomfort and chooses to ignore it. Both are violations, both cause harm, and both are depicted with a level of nuance and emotional intelligence that most live-action dramas struggle to achieve. This is what fusion means in Steven Universe. It is not just a cool animation technique. It is not just a way to make bigger, stronger characters for fight scenes. It is a language for talking about the most complicated, most important, most human aspects of being alive. How we connect with each other, how we trust each other, how we hurt each other, how we heal. And the show speaks that language fluently, in every fusion, in every dance, in every moment where two characters look at each other and decide together to become something more. But that is not even the strangest part, because there is one more category of fusion we have not yet discussed. The fusions that Homeworld fears most. The fusions that threaten the very foundation of the Diamond Authority. And to understand why, we need to look at the diamonds themselves. There is something uniquely unsettling about watching Jasper fall apart. Not because she is a villain, though she certainly functions as one for large stretches of the series. Not because she is cruel, though she has done cruel things. What makes her unravelling so difficult to witness is that underneath all the aggression and the bravado, Jasper is someone who has never once been allowed to be anything other than strong. She was made for war. She emerged from the beta kindergarten on Earth, the very planet she despises, during the final stretch of the Gem Rebellion. She is a product of desperation, created in a rush, and yet she came out perfect, flawless, the ultimate quartz soldier. And for thousands of years, that identity was enough. It had to be. Because on Homeworld you do not get to choose who you are. You simply are what you were made to be, and you serve your diamond, and you do not ask questions. Jasper never asked questions. She fought. She won. She was the best. But then she comes to Earth, And she meets Steven, this strange little hybrid who should not exist. She meets Garnet, a fusion who walks around like a person instead of a weapon. She meets Lapis Lazuli, whose power nearly drowns her at the bottom of the ocean. And for the first time in her existence, Jasper loses. She loses badly, repeatedly, humiliatingly. And it breaks something in her that she does not know how to fix, because Jasper has never been taught to fix things. She has only ever been taught to overpower them. By the time we reach Earthlings, the 22nd episode of Season 3, Jasper has been stripped of everything that defined her. She has lost her ship, lost her crew, lost her fusion with Lapis, lost every encounter with the crystal gems. She is alone in the beta kindergarten, surrounded by the deformed holes that produce lesser quartzes, and she is collecting corrupted gems, keeping them captive. And the viewer understands, even before it happens, what she is planning to do with them. Because Jasper has watched fusion work for others. She has seen Garnet fight with a grace and power that comes from genuine connection. She has felt the raw strength of Malachite, even though that fusion nearly destroyed her. And Jasper, in her broken state, draws exactly the wrong conclusion. She decides that fusion is the answer, but she reduces it to its simplest, crudest interpretation. Fusion equals power, nothing more. No love, no trust, no mutual understanding. Just two beings smashed together to create something bigger. So she grabs a corrupted gem, the creature that fans know as Ocean Jasper, though in her corrupted state she is barely recognizable as a gem at all. She is a monster, a being whose mind has been shattered by the Diamond's attack at the end of the war. She cannot speak, she cannot reason, she certainly cannot consent, and Jasper does not care. She forces the fusion anyway, dragging the corrupted gem into a merge that produces something the show calls Zebra Jasper, a name that comes from the real-world gemstone rather than anything the characters say on screen. The result is hideous. Not in the way Malachite is hideous, where the horror comes from the emotional toxicity between two conscious beings. Zebra Jasper is hideous in a more primal way. The fusion is wrong on a fundamental level. The corrupted gem cannot hold a stable form, and neither can the fusion. It lurches and writhes, a patchwork of stripes and distortion, power without purpose, strength without stability, and it does not last. The corruption begins to spread almost immediately. When Zebra Jasper collapses and the two gems separate, Jasper is already changing. Green lesions bloom across her skin, crawling up her arms and across her face. Smoky Quartz, the newly formed fusion of Steven and Amethyst, who has just made their debut in this same episode, watches in shock. The corruption is contagious. It has jumped from the corrupted gem to Jasper like a disease, transmitted through the intimate act of fusion. This is one of the most disturbing images in the entire series, and it is disturbing precisely because of what it says about fusion. Every other toxic fusion in the show, Malachite, the Sardonyx deception, even the forced fusions in the kindergarten, involves some element of choice, however twisted. Lapis chose to fuse with Jasper, even if her reasons were unhealthy. Pearl chose to deceive Garnet, even though it was wrong. But the corrupted gem that Jasper fuses with cannot choose anything. Its mind is gone, and Jasper, the one being in this equation who can still think, who can still decide, chooses violence anyway. She chooses to use another living being as a tool, and the universe punishes her for it in the most fitting way imaginable. The corruption that she forced upon another now consumes her from within. Steven reaches out to her. He offers to help, and Jasper, even as she is losing herself, refuses. She would rather be destroyed than accept kindness from someone she considers an enemy. She calls Steven by his mother's name, Rose Quartz, because Jasper cannot let go of the war. She cannot let go of anything. That is her tragedy. She is a gem who was built to never let go, and so she holds on to her hatred and her pride until it literally transforms her into a monster. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Jasper remains corrupted for a long time. She is bubbled and stored, a problem deferred. It is not until the events of Change Your Mind, the Season 5 finale, that Steven and the Diamonds use their combined powers to heal all the corrupted gems at once, Jasper included. But healing the corruption does not heal the person, and Steven Universe Future makes this painfully clear. In Fragments, the 16th episode of Future, Steven seeks out Jasper for training. He is spiraling at this point in the sequel series, overwhelmed by his own powers and his own anger, and he goes to the one person he knows who understands rage as a way of life. Jasper lives alone now, isolated in the wilderness, and she agrees to train Steven because she respects strength above all else. For 3 days they spar. Steven grows more aggressive, more reckless, channeling parts of himself that he has spent his entire life trying to suppress. And then, in their final battle, something terrible happens. Steven loses control. He traps Jasper in a barrier of pink energy and fires crystalline spikes directly at her. He shatters her gemstone. He kills her. The moment is devastating, not because of the violence itself, but because of what it reveals about Steven. He has become the thing he feared most. He has used his power to destroy someone else, not through fusion, not through connection, but through raw, uncontrolled force, the same kind of force Jasper worshipped. Steven manages to restore Jasper using the diamond essences and his own healing tears, but the damage to his psyche is done, and Jasper's response to being resurrected is perhaps the most heartbreaking moment in her entire arc. She kneels before Steven and says, "I bow to your strength, my diamond." She does not see a boy who just made a terrible mistake. She sees power and she submits to it, because that is all Jasper knows how to do. Jasper's complete arc, from warrior to broken soldier to corrupted monster to healed but still fundamentally damaged individual, is one of the most unflinching character studies in children's animation, and fusion sits at the center of it. Every major turning point in her story involves fusion in some way. Malachite teaches her that fusion can be intoxicating. Zebra Jasper teaches her that fusion without genuine connection is self-destruction. And Fragments teaches us that the impulse behind forced fusion, the desire to use another being as an instrument of power, can corrupt anyone if they are not careful. Even Steven. The lesson embedded in all of this is not subtle, but it does not need to be. Fusion without love, without consent, without genuine connection, destroys. It destroys the one who forces it. It destroys the one who is forced. And the corruption that results does not stay contained. It spreads outward, touching everything it reaches, like a sickness that feeds on the absence of empathy. And this brings us to the larger question that Steven Universe spends its entire run wrestling with. Why is fusion forbidden on Homeworld in the first place? Not the in-universe answer, though we will get to that, but the deeper structural reason. What is it about fusion that threatens an entire civilization so profoundly that the ruling class would shatter anyone who dares to attempt it? To understand this, you have to understand how Homeworld works. And Homeworld, in the mythology of Steven Universe, is a totalitarian caste system of breathtaking rigidity. Every gem is created in a kindergarten, injected into the ground as a seed, and emerging fully formed with a predetermined purpose. Rubies are soldiers, sapphires are aristocratic seers, pearls are servants, decorative companions assigned to higher-ranking gems, bismuths are builders, lapis lazulis terraform planets. Every gem has a role, and that role is absolute. You do not question it. You do not deviate from it. You serve your diamond and you exist within the narrow parameters that your type allows. Within this system, fusion occupies a very specific and carefully controlled place. Same type fusion is permitted. A group of rubies can fuse into a larger ruby, as we see in Hit the Diamond, the 5th episode of Season 3, where 5 rubies merge into a single towering figure through nothing more elaborate than a cheerleader-style pose. 2 topazes can fuse into a single enforcer, as we see in Are You My Dad?, the 24th episode of Season 4, where the fused topaz serves as a soldier and captor, trapping humans inside her combined body. Same type fusion is acceptable to Homeworld because it does not challenge the hierarchy. A bigger ruby is still just a ruby. A combined topaz is still just a topaz. The fusion produces a larger version of something that already has a designated place in the system. It is a tool of efficiency, nothing more. But cross-type fusion, that is something else entirely. When a ruby fuses with a sapphire, the result is not a bigger ruby or a bigger sapphire. The result is Garnet, a being who has never existed before, who has no predetermined role, who exists outside every category that Homeworld uses to organize itself. Garnet is not a soldier or a seer or a servant. Garnet is a relationship made manifest, a new identity forged from the love between two individuals who were never supposed to meet, let alone merge. And that is precisely what makes cross-type fusion so dangerous to the diamonds. Not the power it creates, though that is significant. What terrifies them is the precedent it sets. If two gems of different types can fuse into something greater than either of them alone, then the caste system is a lie. If a lowly ruby and an aristocratic sapphire can become garnet, then the hierarchy that governs all of gem society is arbitrary, maintained not by natural law but by force. And once that truth becomes visible, once other gems see it with their own eyes, the entire structure begins to shake. This is exactly what happens in Together Alone, the 27th episode of Season 5. Steven has travelled to Homeworld with the crystal gems, and he organises a grand ball in the hopes of bringing the diamonds together and convincing White Diamond to help heal the corrupted gems back on Earth. The ball is a spectacle of rigid Homeworld protocol. Gems stand in their designated places. They perform their designated functions. Everything is controlled, orderly, hierarchical, and then Steven and Connie start to dance. It is an innocent moment. Steven is disappointed that White Diamond has declined to attend, and Connie tries to cheer him up the only way she knows how. They dance, and in doing so they fuse into Stevonnie, and the reaction of the diamonds is immediate and violent. Yellow Diamond is furious. Blue Diamond demands that they unfuse. The entire ballroom freezes in shock, because what has just happened is not merely a breach of etiquette. It is an existential threat to everything Homeworld represents. But here is the part that makes this scene truly extraordinary. The crystal gems do not back down. In solidarity with Stevonnie, ruby and sapphire fuse into garnet. Pearl and amethyst fuse into opal. And then in a brief but electrifying moment, two Homeworld jades who have been watching from the crowd fuse into lemon jade. They are not rebels. They are not crystal gems. They are ordinary Homeworld gems who, in seeing Stevonnie and Garnet and Opal, realise for the first time that they too can become something more. Yellow Diamond poofs them all. She poofs Lemon Jade, Opal and Garnet with a single burst of energy. She grabs Stevonnie and throws them into confinement. The system reasserts itself through violence, as authoritarian systems always do. But the damage is done. The Jades fused. They saw what was possible and they chose it, even knowing the consequences. And that single act of defiance, lasting only seconds, contains the entire political thesis of Steven Universe. The system is not natural, it is enforced. And the moment the enforcement falters, even for a breath, people will choose freedom. This is why The Answer, the 22nd episode of Season 2, resonates so deeply when viewed through the lens of Homeworld politics. When Ruby accidentally fuses with Sapphire thousands of years before the events of the main series, the reaction of Blue Diamond's court is visceral. The assembled gems murmur in anger and disgust. They have never seen anything like this. Two different types of gem becoming one being, and it horrifies them, not because it is inherently wrong, but because it has been taught to them as wrong. Blue Diamond orders Ruby shattered for the transgression, not imprisoned, not punished, shattered. The penalty for daring to become something outside the caste system is death. And Sapphire, an aristocratic gem with every privilege that Homeworld offers, chooses to flee with Ruby rather than allow it. She gives up everything, her status, her court, her planet, her entire identity, because she has felt what it is like to be Garnet. And she knows that no caste system, no matter how powerful, can make that feeling wrong. Rebecca Sugar, the creator of Steven Universe, has been open about the fact that fusion is a queer metaphor. Sugar is bisexual and non-binary, using both she and they pronouns, and the show's exploration of fusion as forbidden love was deeply personal to them. In interviews, Sugar has spoken about fighting Cartoon Network executives to include explicitly queer content in the series. The network was wary, Children's animation had never depicted a same-sex wedding before. It had rarely depicted queer relationships at all, and Sugar played a careful long game, building toward representation gradually. Ruby and Sapphire were not revealed as Garnet's components until episode 52, Jailbreak. Their wedding in Reunited, the 23rd and 24th episodes of Season 5, came over 100 episodes later. When the network balked at the idea of a wedding, Sugar and the creative team began laying the groundwork so thoroughly that a yes became inevitable. The result was one of the most significant moments in the history of children's television. Ruby and Sapphire's wedding, broadcast on Cartoon Network on July 6, 2018, was the first same-sex wedding in a mainstream Western animated children's series. Sugar cried during the recording session. The team knew they were making history, and the wedding itself is framed as the ultimate expression of what fusion means. Ruby and Sapphire do not just get married, they fuse back into Garnet, and Garnet sings, and the song is about love as a choice, as an ongoing act of will, as something you build together every single day. The show was censored or banned in several countries for its LGBTQ content. The United Kingdom edited out scenes of Ruby and Sapphire's affection. Other countries cut episodes entirely. Sugar has spoken about this with a mixture of sadness and determination, noting that the censorship only proved why the representation was necessary. If a child in a country where queerness is criminalized sees Ruby and Sapphire and understands that their love is real, is valid, is worth fighting for, then the show has done something that no amount of censorship can undo. But there is still more that fusion has to teach us, and the lessons of Steven Universe Future prove that even after the war is won, even after the caste system is dismantled and Homeworld begins to change, the work of healing is never finished. Volleyball, the 4th episode of Steven Universe Future, is a quiet episode. There are no grand battles, no world-ending threats, no diamond confrontations. There is only a Pearl with a crack on her face, and another Pearl who does not want to believe how it got there. Pink Pearl, whom Steven nicknames Volleyball, comes to little Homeworld seeking help. She has a fracture across her left eye, a remnant of damage that has persisted for thousands of years. Steven tries his healing powers on it. His healing spit does not work. His healing aura does not work, and gradually the truth emerges. The crack is not physical, it is psychosomatic. It was caused by Pink Diamond, Steven's mother, during one of her legendary tantrums. Pink Diamond lost control of her powers and struck Pink Pearl so hard that the damage became permanent, etched into her very being, not as a wound of the body, but as a wound of the spirit. Our Pearl, the Pearl who served Pink Diamond after she became Rose Quartz, does not want to believe this. She knew Pink Diamond. She loved her. She watched her grow and change and become someone better, and she cannot reconcile the person she loved with the person who had hurt another gem so badly that the damage could never be fully healed. But Pink Pearl knows a different version of Pink Diamond, the earlier version, the one who threw tantrums and broke things and did not yet understand the consequences of her own power. And neither Pearl is wrong. Both of them are carrying pieces of a truth that is too large for either of them to hold alone, so they fuse. And the fusion is not for battle, it is not for power, it is not strategic or desperate or forced. Pearl and Pink. Pearl fuse into Mega Pearl because it is the only way for them to truly understand each other. Through fusion, they share their memories. Pearl sees what Pink Diamond was like before she changed. The rages, the carelessness, the casual cruelty of someone who had never been taught to consider the feelings of those beneath her. And Pink Pearl sees what Pink Diamond became after she left Homeworld. The growth, the compassion, the genuine love for Earth and its inhabitants. Together, as Mega Pearl, they hold the complete picture. Not a flattering picture, and not a damning one, just the truth. Their fusion dance is called Empathy, and the name is perfect, because that is exactly what this fusion represents. Two beings who have been hurt by the same person, finding solidarity not through anger or revenge, but through the simple, radical act of understanding each other's pain. Mega Pearl does not exist to fight anyone. She exists to heal, and in a show that has spent 5 seasons using fusion as a metaphor for every kind of relationship, from the romantic to the toxic to the political, this quiet act of therapeutic fusion feels like a culmination. It feels like the show saying, after everything, that the highest use of intimacy is not love or power, or even freedom. It is empathy. It is the willingness to hold someone else's pain alongside your own and to say, I see you, I believe you, and you are not alone. This is what Steven Universe Future does with fusion that the original series could not. The original series used fusion to tell stories about falling in love, about toxic relationships, about political oppression, about consent and autonomy, and the right to exist as you are. All of those stories were necessary. All of them were groundbreaking, but Future takes it one step further. In Future, fusion becomes a tool for processing trauma. It becomes a way for characters who have survived terrible things to sit with their pain together, to merge their broken pieces into something that is not fixed, exactly, but is at least more whole than either of them alone. And then there is Change Your Mind, the grand finale of the original series, where Steven's gem is physically pulled from his body by White Diamond. It is the most violent thing that happens to Steven in the entire show, and it is also the most revealing. When the pink gemstone separates from Steven's body, it does not regenerate into rose quartz. It does not become pink diamond. It forms a glowing pink version of Steven himself, a gem half that exists independently for a few agonizing seconds before reuniting with his human body. And when the gem half speaks, it says only one thing. She is gone. Rose quartz is gone. Pink diamond is gone. There is only Steven. This is not a fusion in the traditional sense, but it is the show's definitive statement about identity, which is, at its core, what fusion has always been about. Steven is not a fusion of his mother and his father, not really. He is something new, something that has never existed before. Just like Garnet is not simply Ruby plus Sapphire, just like Stevonnie is not simply Steven plus Connie, Steven himself is not a combination of the people who made him. He is his own person, whole and complete, and the gem that sits in his navel is not a relic of his mother. It is his. It has always been his. The sequence was guest animated by James Baxter, and the 30 seconds of Steven reuniting with his gem half remain one of the most beautifully animated moments in the history of the medium. It is tender and overwhelming and exactly right. Every fusion in Steven Universe, every forbidden one, every sanctioned one, every toxic and beautiful and terrifying one has been building to this understanding. That identity is not static, that relationships shape who we are, but they do not define us. That love is a choice, and consent is sacred, and the most powerful thing two people can do is not merge into something stronger, but see each other clearly and choose to stay. Think about what this show accomplished. It took a fantasy concept, two magical beings merging into a single body, and used it to tell stories about the most human things imaginable. About falling in love for the first time and not knowing what your body is doing. About being trapped in a relationship that is destroying you. About being told that who you are is wrong, disgusting, unnatural. About finding your people in the margins, in the abandoned places, among the outcasts and the defective, and the ones the system threw away. About the long, slow, unglamorous work of healing after the revolution is over, and the hard part, the living part, begins. Every forbidden fusion taught us something. Garnet taught us that love is the answer, even when the world says it should not exist. Malachite taught us that fusion without genuine care is a prison for everyone involved. The forced fusions in the kindergarten taught us that consent is not negotiable, that using another being's body without their permission is the deepest violation imaginable. Stevonnie taught us that identity is fluid, beautiful, and worth celebrating. Fluorite taught us that love does not have an upper limit. Steg taught us that family bonds can transcend every boundary. Jasper's corrupted fusion taught us that power without connection is self-destruction. Omega Pearl taught us that empathy, the willingness to hold another person's pain, might be the most powerful fusion of all. And now, as this video draws to a close, perhaps you are still awake, or perhaps you drifted off somewhere around the third or fourth section, which is perfectly fine. That is what these videos are for. But if you are still here, still listening, consider this one final thought. The reason Steven Universe resonates so deeply, the reason people return to it years after it ended, is not because it tells us that love conquers all. It is because it tells us that love is hard. That connection requires vulnerability. That being seen, truly seen by another person is the most terrifying and most rewarding thing a human being can experience. And that the systems that tell us who we are allowed to love, who we are allowed to become, who we are allowed to be, those systems are not laws of nature. They are choices, and they can be unmade. That, in the end, is what every forbidden fusion is about. Not the breaking of rules, but the making of something new, something that has never existed before, something that the old world could never have predicted or contained. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being here. Whether this was your first time with one of these videos, or whether you have been with us for a while, it means a great deal. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.